If you want to support our podcast financially, please visit patreon.com/IIMBSB. Also, email us with questions or ideas at ifimaypodcast@gmail.com. On today's episode, we give you the second half of our discussion with Hannah Smith, exploring the 1997 book and sensation, I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
It's a great conversation, but if you haven't heard part 1, you might want to stop and go back to last week's episode for context.
After that, we discuss chapter 2 of Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity, where we look at the tension between intimacy and closeness and how it can be at odds with passion, lust, and desire.
Welcome to If I May Be So Bold, a podcast about relationships.
The ones we have with others, the one we have with ourselves.
And given that Dan and I are a couple, you're going to be hearing about our relationship too.
I'm Dan Epstein, a recording artist, former opera singer, and relational coach.
I'm Justin Waring-Crane, a therapist, recovering perfectionist, and karaoke star.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that this book comes from this idea that he had these experiences in dating that were messy and intense. Because, dating and desire and connection and intimacy when you're so young, it feels really intense. And that is a shared thing. But it's interesting to me the way, that faith is offered as this way to sort of soar above all that.
I think that's so insightful. I think that I felt that a little bit when I was rereading the book, because you're right. It's like he takes something that is true, which is that, he probably did get his heart broken when he dated that girl for 2 years. And that's so tricky and hard, and we can all sort of understand what that feeling is like, and it's not a good feeling. And it did feel like he kind of used this ideology and created this whole culture around avoiding experiencing something difficult and messy that isn't black and white, or that isn't right or wrong, that isn't so clean cut and binary like so much of what is taught in, that culture of Christianity is. So it's like an easy little answer to avoid that.
Right. And we talk about on this podcast, that just the ways in which a relationship requires, getting uncomfortable and work and time and vulnerability, whatever, all these things that are more the modern sort of view of relationships. And I guess this other version, this old-fashioned version is if you are of service as a person in a relationship, then the relationship will flow. Is that how you guys see it? I'm definitely interested in this idea of you're serving God and you're serving other people by making their life easier or something, by not being selfish. Is it kind of that? By not being self-serving?
Maybe that's some of it. I think that it's kind of convoluted in the book, in that the idea of being selfless is the idea of not giving into your own desires and sexual desires. So he in the book, I don't know that he believes this now, but in the books he would associate that with selfishness. And so the idea of being selfless is very commingled with the idea of purity, which is confusing. But yeah, I think that in that context, it's being not paying attention to what like your own like desires, which would be which like desire, like especially like specifically sexual desires, which would be put in the context of or the category of things of the world, not of God. So like there's like a verse in the Bible that says something like we're in the world but not of the world. So you're supposed to be separate. So that would be like a worldly desire. And by paying attention to that and giving that attention in your life, you're selfish. By doing what you're supposed to do or what God is supposed to, your perception of what God thinks you should do, that is associated as being selfless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, Dan, maybe you've seen like these bumper stickers on cars that it's like not of this world, but I don't know if you would know that.
No, I don't know about
I'm going to
those.
point them out to you because Hannah, you've probably seen them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like a sort of logo. I'm going to show them to you, but
cool.
It's like the idea that there's worldly desires, which includes sexual desires. And then there's, what's wholesome and godly and pure.
Yeah.
And there's not like an integration of the two, which feels sad to me because it's like clearly God made our bodies. He made our desires. He made our sexuality. And it's like, like maybe he knows that you're going to feel sexual and even wants that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, Justin, you had talked about reading the book and then being in this relationship and continuing to have sex, but feeling really like guilty about it. Like, even if you intellectually, I guess, when did you really start to feel like the messages of that book and of that, of the broader culture of these messages that you started to separate yourself, like truly be able to not feel that anymore? Like, how long did that take for you?
I think it's still happening, because even, that time in my life where I was feeling really intense guilt, that was probably like ages 17 to, I don't know, 25. Partly because my parents were still so invested, especially my mom was still so openly invested in me not having sex until I was married. And then she, through her own work and her own therapy and her own self-realizations, was like, if you want to invite your boyfriend home to stay with me and Ken, it's like her and my dad, like you can do that and that's okay,
Were you
and
surprised? Were you surprised?
I was really surprised. Yeah. I was really surprised. That was probably when I was in my late 20s, I guess. I'm in my early 30s now. So like that, not that long ago.
And would the meaning behind that be like you and your boyfriend could sleep in the same room?
In the same room. Yes, exactly. So it's like, until that point, bringing a boyfriend home meant that, we would be sleeping in different rooms if we stayed overnight. So it's still a process because like we've talked about and like so many other people talk about who have similar upbringings, like there's no switch that you can flip to say like, okay, I used to see sex as dirty and bad and wrong. And now that I am married or now that I'm, now that I see my relationship as okay, it's free and it's flowing and it's natural and wonderful.
Not
like
shame driven.
And not shame based. Yeah. But, Nadia Bolz-Weber, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but she wrote a book called Shameless. That's all about this exact stuff, within the context of religion and, sort of she interviews people who were brought up in the church and who stayed on the path, right? Of I'm not going to have sex until marriage. I'm going to remain pure as it's defined by this community. She interviewed these people who then got married and were like, this doesn't work. You know, this isn't like, I didn't get what I was promised, which was I was going to have like amazing, incredible sex once I was married.
Yeah.
So her book was really important for me. I read that probably a few years ago. And, you know, my parents' own acceptance, because everything about growing up in the church was funneled through the opinions and the approval of my parents. So when that started to shift, that was really healing for me. But it's still challenging because I still find myself feeling embarrassed of what I want and sheepish when it comes to asking for that. So
yeah,
it just takes, you know, practice and like having a supportive partner like Dan to be like, yeah, like this is so wildly embarrassing. I don't know why I feel embarrassed. And I'm now embarrassed that I'm embarrassed. And, but I'm still going to like try to do it and getting that like really safe container of Dan to put that in. And, that's really healing. Yeah.
What about for you, Hannah? What's that been?
Yeah.
Like?
Same question for you.
I mean, that's a great, I would love to read that book. That sounds so interesting. I think that it's kind of same. Like, I would say there's still some work to be done. And, you know, sometimes it'll crop up on me and it'll be surprising, you know, how things go where you can feel like you've healed a lot and then sometimes it's still there. But, you know, going through my divorce really helped me a lot with it. Because, you know, I was thinking about this today because I think that one of the reasons that I feel so passionately about, not just this book really, like it's more so about like the culture of everything we've talked about, is because it really to me played very much into my marriage. Because it wasn't the only reason I got married. Not at all. Like I really loved my ex-husband and I still do. Like we have a great relationship, but we never had a good sexual relationship. And even before we were married, I could tell that. I knew that. Like there was something that it just wasn't, there wasn't chemistry in that way. And I think part of it was that I just like loved him so much. And so I still moved forward. But there was also a very distinct part where like I had all this sex with other people in my early 20s and really tried to break free from this idea that like that was damaging to like explore my own sexuality. But it was so hard to break free from. And I really felt deep inside that like I had kind of like fucked up by going and having sex with people. And then there was some part of me that felt like I was coming back to what I should be doing, the right thing, by being with this person who I would go on to have no sexual satisfaction with. And so then like being in a relationship with someone for 7 years and potentially looking forward to this could be the rest of my life, I think really like at the end, I just was able to be like, this is bullshit. This is such bullshit. This is not healthy for me. I've been lied to. And I had a lot of anger about it. And also like really a lot of helpful therapy and really felt like I started to like create a healthy relationship with myself and my own body and my own sexuality. Like that was sort of the beginning of that journey. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that experience. And I'm grateful that like, that I had also like a really wonderful ex-husband friend to go through it with, because he was on his own journey. But,
sure.
But yeah, I mean, so I do feel like I feel like a lot more free in that area now, way more than I used to be. And it's like so wonderful and beautiful. And I just hope that anyone that's still in that can, yeah. I mean, just being able to see your body is a good thing and my sexuality is a good thing is so huge. Like something I would never have thought of when I was a teenager. So
wow.
still work to be done. But I think it's why I'm passionate about this subject, because I really do feel like it was such a thing to start to overcome in my life, like truly.
Mm. Yeah, I love hearing you talk about that. It's really,
Me too.
it's really powerful. I
Me
just think
too.
about any relationship, how it's really hard if one person in any relationship like doesn't know what they desire, right? Like it makes it hard to be a partner to that person too. And it makes it hard to like help each other and yeah,
Yeah,
make each other feel good, obviously. Like I'm thinking about we had Mia Schachter on last season, who's a consent educator, and I'm doing a training with them. And we were talking about these types of consent, and one of the types of consent is like more murky when it's people who know each other. And they were talking about a dynamic that can happen when someone's like, when both people are really easygoing, where it's like, what do you want to have for dinner? And the other person's like, I don't care, whatever. What do you want? You know? And it's like, that's sort of presented as if we're just being selfless, like we're just being accommodating of the other person. But what Mia was saying was that's actually, you know, a way to not take responsibility for making a decision and then like how the decision is going to impact other people. It's like trying to defer the responsibility elsewhere of that, that really hits, because my family, there's a lot of whatever you want, it's fine. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely like, it can be a vulnerable thing to say what you want. I mean, it is a very vulnerable thing, right? Even if it's something like, right. I want to eat here, I want to do this. And then like gets way more vulnerable if you're talking about like intimacy, right?
But like the fact that not only are you being a good partner by not like being selfish or like stating your desires or having desires, but you're also gonna go to heaven.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh man.
I would like to talk about just his arc and like who he is now, great. If we can.
Yeah. I'm up for, but that's great. I have time. I'm not in a rush.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I kept like wavering in my cynicism towards him about the fact that he has remained a public figure throughout this whole thing, you know, and that is like obviously a hard thing to navigate for him. And Justin was saying before we started that listening to him talk, she was kind of coming around to him. So maybe Justin, do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I think it's important to say that, you know, if I have the timeline wrong, then I'm going to hell. But in 2019, he kind of renounced the book. That was the timeline that I picked up. He has since unpublished the book, so it's no longer being printed.
Although you can still buy it on Amazon.
You can still buy it on Amazon. I got it for free because I had a gift card. Don't buy it with your own money. That's what I'm saying. So I don't know, you know, what happened for him. And I'm actually in the process of trying to be a private investigator, and figuring out what happened. But he has kind of done a 180. He has apologized to people for writing this book and for harming people with all of the messages, which started on Twitter. Actually, somebody talked about how this book was weaponized against them, and he responded directly to them saying, I'm so sorry. And then everyone was like, wow, Josh Harris is apologizing, and that's cool, but it's also not enough. And
he also said about that interaction, this person messaged him or tweeted him, said this was weaponized against me. And he said, I'm so sorry. And then he said that the person said, that's the first time a religious leader has ever admitted that they've done something wrong and apologized.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, it's sad and also not surprising. So yeah, And I really appreciate it because he obviously does really feel sorry. And he's, of course, now an adult with a fully developed frontal lobe, which he was not when he wrote this book that sold millions of copies and told everybody else how to live. So he's now had the time and space to reflect on that. And, yeah, where was I going with this? Okay, so he's done a 180. He said, my book was really harmful. I don't really believe these things. One source that I read said that he is now saying he's not even a Christian anymore. He began to make this documentary, or did make this documentary. It's kind of unclear to me now, called I Survived, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, where he goes around and interviews people who survived the book, and it's really harmful messaging. Yeah, I've now kind of lost my
thread. Did he get divorced too?
So okay. So he and Shannon, rest in peace, Josh and Shannon. They're not dead, but their relationship is dead.
Well, all that as it was,
all that sex they had on their honeymoon, I guess, wasn't enough. So yeah, I mean, I think it's worthwhile listening to the interview that he did on Nadia Bolz-Weber's podcast, which is called The Confessional. She's the one who wrote Shameless, that book that I really love.
I feel like, like I said, I was really like I kept changing sort of my feeling towards him as I was watching him. He's like a business leader now, which like he's got like, and like the way I see him is like throughout the constant from his young days with the book and then to now is like, this seems like a guy who really wants to like feel like he's a good guy and like he's doing good things. Like that was very present in that as this young man being like pious and, you know, romantic and like, you know, faithful. And now he's still like in his TED talk, he has this very benevolent energy. It seems like I project onto him that he's really afraid of his shadow, like coming out, even though he's been through like obviously this major collapse and like changing all these things. Like he's still like, you can tell like his demeanor, his body language, the way he uses his voice is like pure, like warmth and like understanding, you know, which was striking to me. And the documentary thing is weird to me a little bit because it's like, so all these people can kind of tell him to his face how they fucked up. I feel like that is kind of weird because it's like he is trying to atone for the harm he's caused. So like the way the documentary's been described, I've seen is like he becomes very sympathetic, right? Because you're seeing these people like kind of pour it on with him. So then like he becomes more the victim in some way. Oh, and I think that's weird. Even though I've never seen the documentary, but the way it was described, I was kind of like, I don't know. That seems like a messy thing. Like that seems complicated. Like he could not be in the documentary, you know, like it could just be about the people who are harmed, but it's like he is there in every part of it. It seems like, so he's on the receiving end now.
Right.
I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I haven't seen the documentary and I want to hear your thoughts, Hannah, but I have not seen the documentary, but I do feel like that's a choice to be like, yeah, I'm now a central figure in the documentary and I'm kind of centering my own experience as, oh, woe was me. I was 21. I didn't know what I was doing. And it's like, yeah, I feel sorry for you because you were, in a sense, you were a victim of this culture and this community. And you kind of, in order to feel good about yourself, became this mouthpiece for messages that made you feel better about yourself. But yeah, I mean, I'm just like, this is all, I'm not saying his
Right.
apology isn't worth anything. I'm just saying like you did make a shit ton of money. And if you're really sorry, like I want to see some of that money in my bank account as reparations.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. What
do
are you
feel,
doing
Hannah?
with that money? I mean, I don't know,
Right.
actually. Maybe he is doing something, but yeah, I feel similarly. I mean, I do think that it's good that he's apologized and it's good that he's acknowledged that this was harmful. But yeah, there's still a little bit of the like self-promotion aspect of it that does like kind of bother me, I guess, or just, you know, I haven't seen the documentary either, so I got to go watch that. But it also sounds like it's a redemption tour and like he's still making it about himself. And by the way, that's such a Christian thing to do. There's so many pastors who've like had affairs with someone for years and then they are shamed and then they do their redemption tour and reinvent themselves and start a new business or whatever. That's fine. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a path to change. There absolutely should.
Right.
Maybe I'm just a little bit allergic to the way he talks, the way he's sort of still spinning ideas and trying to influence people. To me, feels like it's born of the same like seed of what he was doing before.
Right. That's like,
really
okay,
well put,
so it's like, I do feel this. It's like, okay, how can I be good? Well, I'm being told that to be good, I have to stop dating and approach romantic relationships in this way. And now it's like, okay, that didn't work. But now to be good, I have to renounce all of that and say that I am sorry. And, you know, it's like, okay, so are we still just falling into like, you're either good or you're bad? And it's like, that's all the same paradigm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel skeptical about it. And I want to spend more time with it because this has been such a huge theme in my own therapy. You know, it's like, yeah, maybe I'm headed in the right direction, but am I now just saying that I'm a good person because I'm, you know, taking better care of myself where before I wasn't, you know, it gets very confusing.
You're saying like your own grappling with being good, like doing the right things.
Right. It's like
are still connected to the old way of thinking.
It's like, it's so easy to slip back into, the paradigm, like the extreme black and white thinking of like, okay, maybe what I'm doing now is healthier for me, but I'm still judging myself on the same scales of I'm either good or I'm bad. And now it's like, it used to be because, oh, I'm good because I'm serving my community. And now it's, oh, I'm good because I'm taking care of myself, but it's still within that same construct that's actually really harmful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today, we are diving into chapter 2 of Mating in Captivity.
How do you want to get into it?
Well, let me just read you a little quote.
Okay.
Love enjoys knowing everything about you. Desire needs mystery. What comes up when you hear that?
When I hear that, I mean, it's great. It's provocative for me. I think, you know, the model I was raised with was always like closeness in terms of spending time together, familiarity, comfort. So I didn't really, I think I wanted that for myself because it's what I knew. Makes sense. And I guess what comes up for me is I think about a relationship where mystery and distance can exist. And it's exciting to me. It also requires a lot of trust, I think. Like I'm just thinking of pitfalls or like conditions that would make that a hard thing to have.
Yeah.
You know, anxious, avoidant, dynamic, for example.
Totally. Even in a secure attachment, it can trigger feelings of anxiety.
Yeah. And I think about us, and when I was reading this chapter, I was having fear come up a little bit. Thinking about, you're living with me now, and thinking about, like, for example, we're figuring out what we're going to do over the holidays. And I was just like having thoughts of like, maybe it's bad that it's just assumed we're going to do these things all together. Like on the one hand, it's like really nice in the holidays to just like be tucked away somewhere with your partner. But in general, I think it was bringing up thoughts of just like, to have that autonomy. I think that could be an important thing of just making plans, like not defaulting, I guess. Not defaulting. And like, I haven't really been in the headspace of like, ooh, maybe I'll plan something with a friend, in terms of like a trip or like a weekend away, whatever. But I think I desire to make a space for that.
Me too. Yeah. I like that you said that. Yeah. Because it's hard, right? Because it's like, there's so many things that I want to do with you. And at the same time, it's like, I don't want that to be the most important thing.
Yeah. And, what she expresses in this chapter that I found really compelling is that when a couple starts dating, that there's like a built-in separateness. So if you start like falling in love with someone or being intrigued, connecting, dating, that this separateness is there. So it's actually kind of this thing you're trying to overcome. Where you're like, or, you might be having thoughts around, is this person going to call it off at any moment? So it's like you're working with that fear, or it's like, I don't know, like fantasizing about what it would feel like to have the relationship turn into something really deep. But you don't have that in your hand, right? That's something that could elude you.
Yeah.
So you're working against that force in a way.
Yeah. She says in the beginning, you can focus on the connection because the psychological distance is already there. It's part of the structure. But when two people become fused, connection can no longer happen.
Connection.
Because there's nothing to connect to. It's like you've become one person. So what are you even connecting to outside of yourself?
Yeah. And I think the fact that you moved in with me recently is like, this is a very relevant theme for us. And so I think having those feelings of like, I don't want to fall into that pattern, or like, I don't want to lose my sort of sense of like having an adventure on my own in my own life still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that now is this thing that goes away.
Yeah.
That's scary to me. And then, so this chapter, also a big part of it is talking about that in the past, a lot of people have put forward the idea that your intimate life and your sexual life were like, if not the same, directly linked. So like if you had an issue with your sex life, for example, that something was missing in that was like a manifestation of something, that's not working in your intimate connection or like in your relationship, like at large. And what Esther is saying is that is not how she sees it. She sees it like these are separate entities. For some people, they are actually an inverse interaction, where if you have too much closeness, too much intimacy, and what she calls comfort love, that actually spells death for lust, passion, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. She says that contrary to what many couples therapists have claimed over the years, increased emotional intimacy is often accompanied by decreased sexual desire. And on the flip side, you can have really good sex with someone and not have a lot of intimacy with them.
Right. Like that could be the area where you get the only intimacy really is from physical, carnal.
Yeah. And maybe even because you don't feel intimate with them.
Right.
That makes the sexual connection more exciting.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know if you're comfortable talking about this, but I remember this just sent me back to earlier when we were dating, you telling me that in the past you had used sex as a way to like get reassurance.
Yeah.
For maybe where their intimacy wasn't forming.
Bingo. Didn't work. Not that anyone was surprised by that.
Yeah.
Were you going somewhere with that?
No, it just seems relevant. Like, I don't know. Like that was your experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you were seeking something.
Yes. I thought, if sex is this avenue to connection and closeness, if we just have more sex, then we're going to feel closer. But it didn't go so well.
And you were maybe seeking to have some more control in the relationship too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely.
And I think with intimacy in general, I think that is probably pretty consistent with a lot of people of closeness, comfort, merging. We know everything that's going on. We're doing everything. We're planning everything. Like constant reassurance, like reminder, like we're together.
Yeah.
Like we're, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's scary.
Yeah. And what a hard thing to navigate, because it's like what we're talking about is like, you want to have that experience of I'm going out on my own. I'm having this experience separate. Like I'm feeling my autonomy. I'm feeling like I'm having this, individual existence. And then when I come back with my partner, I'm like excited to return with this energy I've been infused with from having this other experience. And it's like feeding something, right? But in order to have that, you have to have some trust, right? You have to have a relationship where there's communication, where your wanting separateness isn't going to feel like a threat to your partner.
Yeah.
And if you have a really intense abandonment wound, you might be really uncomfortable with your partner saying, no, I'd actually rather not be with you this evening. I'd rather go do something else.
Yeah. 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 We talk about, in these more extreme situations where one person has been abandoned and the other person feels more secure and doesn't have a history of being abandoned, even their partner turning away from them in bed, like turning and facing the other way, is like they're back feeling abandoned all over again. Just in that simple, just body gesture.
Right.
So, or like leaving the room. Like I've talked to people who it's like when my partner leaves the room, as soon as they walk out, I'm like, they're losing interest in me, It's like, oh, that's really, really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes to, I think that things that get formed early in a relationship where we're making all these agreements silently, like when I'm going to do this for you.
Yeah.
And I think about the first time you and I went to the mountains with friends, like to this house in the mountains. And I remember
just with one friend, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that was probably that trip. Yeah. Hey, Case.
Hey, Casey.
And I remember, because it had been so long since I'd been in a long-term relationship. I remember we were hanging out, the three of us. Justin, as she's very reliable to do, went to bed earlier than everyone else. And I remember like I had my nervous system like did something, and it was because it was flashing me back to my old relationship in my 20s when my partner at the time would go to bed earlier and I would feel like this rush, like I couldn't be present anymore because I felt like for a few different reasons I needed to like join her in bed soon, you know, and I wasn't at ease because some agreement had been made or there was some fear on my part of like getting my needs met that I didn't know I was having a stressful experience really at the time, but looking back, it feels very clear.
Right. Sometimes when you need to not have a stressful experience, right? Around a certain thing, like when you didn't feel super stressed that I was going to bed first and that you wouldn't.
To reflect,
that you're like, why does this feel different? Oh, that other time was actually really stressful.
Yeah. It's like I'm having the logical understanding of like everything's actually fine. I don't need to do anything, even though my nervous system is telling me something.
Yeah.
Saying something.
Your nervous system is like, oh, this feels like that other time, but are we going to be okay? Is everything okay? And you were actually able to be like, yeah, everything is okay. Like, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. I hate that word. I hate myself for saying it. Okay. So in this chapter, you know, it's fucking great. She's Esther. God, I love you. She talks about, you know, that it's just love and desire. They're just at odds with each other, and intimacy and eroticism are at odds with each other. So, once you have that thing that you wanted, you know, intimacy, closeness, that relationship with the other person, then it's very hard to desire them. So it's like you feel like you have them. You have to kind of remind yourself that like, no, you don't. Like you never fully have ownership of this other person, even if you have a secure connection with them. And that's something I have to remind myself of because I can feel like, everything's so stable, you know, like Dan's just always going to be there, you know, and that's not true. But and it's actually good that I feel like you're going to be around. But it also can make me feel like not excited or like what's there to pursue, you know? So I do find that like if you are more aloof or you know, take time and do things on your own or whatever, like make plans that don't involve me. It's like, it's nice to have this feeling of like wanting to go get you and like missing you or kind of wanting to chase you, but not in a way that's like, does he still love me? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Should we get into some of the like anecdotal stuff? Interesting.
We could. Yeah.
No, you don't think so?
Well, you know, let's share one of the anecdotes that Esther.
So one of the anecdotes in this chapter is about a couple. And she was expressing this like this is really common for her patients. Couple starts dating, strong connection, strong desire, like compatibility is really good. John and Beatrice.
They basically just...
I said Beatrice.
Trist. But they have like a crazy good like sexual connection, sexual chemistry. So they're basically just in bed for 6 months.
Yeah. And eventually, they're getting all their needs met. It's good. They're together, like they're firmly together. And John comes into her office and is like, everything's great. Like, love her, like comfortable, compatible. We work really well together, but we never have sex.
Yeah. They've moved in together at this point. So it's confusing, right? Because they're in love and everything's working. So shouldn't that mean that they're having good sex and actually, you know, having it sometimes?
Yeah.
I didn't say that in a cool way. Shouldn't it mean that they're having sex too if their relationship's working?
Right.
No. So it turns out that John feels trapped in the relationship because as Beatrice has come to rely on him more, it's reminding him of how his own mother relied on him for emotional support.
Yeah.
And so the more that Beatrice, leans on John, the less attracted he is to her.
Yeah. So this is a situation where Esther is trying to find a way to create more separateness. More
individuation. Yeah.
So for some people, there's a different anecdote in this chapter, she might prescribe stop touching each other and displaying affection so much.
Yeah. Because
that type of thing of closeness killing desire, that's like a small way a couple could try and create more separateness where there's something there. There's that thing we're describing of room to want to go get your partner.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think about us and I think about how there's times where I reach for you or I want to get close and snuggle or sit on you or hug you. And it's yeah, this feels so nice. I'm doing this because it feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's it's not coming out of I just want to grab you and
Yeah.
It's a different feeling.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm not desiring you, but it's just it's like putting on a warm blanket,
Yeah.
That's, I think, the comfort love, which isn't bad. I want to say it's not bad.
No. And in fact, I'm thinking about that study. I think it was at Stanford or Harvard.
One of those
of that one of the biggest factors in living long and healthy is being loved,
Yeah.
So it's not a small thing.
Yeah.
But you want both, right?
Yeah.
You don't, it just feels like death to me, the idea of eliminating uncertainty and passion and excitement.
It is death. It's death. So for John and Beatrice, she prescribes that Beatrice move out of John's apartment because Beatrice has kind of stopped seeing her friends. She stopped doing her own thing. John is really her whole world at this point. And so Beatrice moves out and starts a PhD program, starts seeing her friends again, is more autonomous. And then that allows her and John to come back together in a way that's much more alive. And
where they're not, and she says Beatrice is no longer organizing her life around John, which is kind of what we were talking about.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. I relate to that.
Yeah. And so do you want to talk about how it's going for us in terms of you're living here, but you have your separate room. So we're kind of dancing between separateness and togetherness.
Yeah. So we have our separate bedrooms, which was such a good idea. I already know, even though it's only been a month. It's been, it's just, I don't know how we would have made it work the other way. I'm sure we would have figured it out, but if you could do separate bedrooms, I really recommend it. It's nice for so many reasons.
Yeah.
I think it builds up that desire. I do think that when you spend time in your own bed and your own space, then getting in bed with your partner is like a reunion,
Yeah.
It's an actual reunion. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
And it's you can have the best of both worlds in a lot of ways because you can cuddle with each other before bed, and then I can go to my own room and have the kind of sleep that I want to have with my body pillow and my fan blowing and just getting the room really cold and falling asleep. And
you wrote sit around and fart.
Fart. Okay. So, sometimes you just have really stinky farts and you need to sit around and fart and you don't really want anyone else to smell that. I think it's important to have like your own space where you can do that. It's huge. I was feeling that the other day because I was like, oh, anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, thank God I have my own room and like, I'm going to go to bed and like, I'm not going to be thinking about like holding in a fart. Not that Dan's always like, let it out, you know, he's not trying to make me hold my farts in. But it's just, I don't want that. I don't want that to be our dynamic.
Sure.
Okay. And cultivating a secret garden. So Esther talks about how everyone should cultivate a secret garden. So a space doesn't have to be a physical space, but a spiritual space, emotional space, an imaginatory realm that's just your own, you know, that you share these essential parts of your life, but essential doesn't mean all. Essential doesn't mean everything.
Yeah.
So something happened a couple weeks ago where I came home and I had a night of just doing my own thing. And Dan was like, what did you do? And I was like, yeah, I just don't want to tell you because it's not because of I did anything wrong or anything naughty or anything I need to hide, but it's just that I want to have things that I don't tell you about and I want to have secrets. And how did you feel about that? Can you share?
Well, it alarmed me partially because it was a situation where Justin had been really depressed and like that morning woke up really depressed and then came home that night and was like, seemed really happy. And I just was like, is she like having a crisis? You know what I mean? And like doing something, I don't know. So it just like, it sent me a little bit down a rabbit hole, but then I asked you to tell me just a little more why you weren't telling me. And then once I it wasn't just what you said, but just like I could feel the energy of like how you responded to that question. I was like able to come back to a place of trust with you.
Okay.
And felt. Yeah.
But initially it was kind of like unsettling. Right?
Yeah. And it was a break of pattern.
Yeah.
There's this quote I really like about when you're starting to date someone and it's just like it's a match and it feels like it's you know the feeling of falling in love, basically, where Esther says, you see me as I've never seen myself and I like what you see. With you and through you I will become what I long to be, which is like I think a pretty apt description of what it feels like. And I remember that with Justin, feeling like she was noticing things in me that I would not notice in myself necessarily because it's my normal, but like feeling appreciated for something that you just like intuitively do, you know, just instinctively do, or like a behavior or whatever is like so affirming. And it's easy to get really swept away in that. And it feels so good. It feels like life is so full of possibility when you're getting that.
Oh yeah. It's like this you feel like a whole new world is opening up to you. You know, it's like you can see the world through this other person and see yourself through this other person in a way that's, it's so exciting. It's so intoxicating. Yeah. Ooh. I want to read one more quote. This is kind of toggling back to this idea of comfort love. Esther says, the psychologist Virginia Goldner makes an accurate distinction between the flaccid safety of permanent coziness and the dynamic safety of couples who fight and make up and whose relationship is a succession of breaches and repairs.
Yeah.
I really like that because what I was sort of trained to fantasize about and imagine for myself was the first option, the flaccid safety of permanent coziness. That's just what I thought a healthy relationship was. Something very like stable and just like always good and always perfect. And we don't fight. We don't have conflict.
Yeah. And in doing so, maybe you're making agreements
Mm-hmm.
to not mirror each other
Yeah.
or express our true feelings.
Yeah. Everything's fine. Everything's always fine. And that means because we're so in love, everything's just like always fine.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh God. It's good. Great chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. And that's our show. Thanks for joining us. Our music is by Nightlight. We self-produce this podcast, so please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps.